BackandJuanGalt.com! Woo! And I'm back.
So, all right.
Yeah.
See you.
You too. Well, you need no introduction. A lot of people know you in the space. You're working with Blockstream right now. You're one of the co-founders of Blockstream.
Right.
One of the things that I really like about Blockstream is the green wallet, the green address wallet. I've been put together a document recently to try to introduce people to Bitcoin. It's one of the 4 wallets in the space. They can actually download the code, all the code from the internet, and then package it into an APK and upload it to your phone. And it's deterministically built. It's the actual source code, right? So a lot of companies say that they're open source, but can you really download their code and package the software and run it deterministically and have it be the same code? And so Green Wallet is one of the few wallets that does that, and there's a lot of features. So it's the one that I recommend. So that's great work there.
Yeah, cool. I mean, actually, I saw recently somebody had made a website with a ranking, and they'd listed 20, 30 wallets. And there were, as you said, only 3, 4 that had deterministic build. There were more with source code, but no deterministic build and things like that. And some without source code, which is kind of scary. And some custody ones where you're trusting somebody else to even hold the coins in the first place. So yeah, we have actually an interesting hybrid where you get the kind of security services of the two-factor authentication server. So when you spend a coin, there's actually 2 signatures with a multisig. One from the key in your wallet, which you have backups for, and one from the two-factor server. So the two-factor authentication server won't sign unless you pass the two-factor authentication, which could be Google Auth, SMS, PGP encrypted email, things like that. And so you might think, well, is there some custody risk? Could Blockstream, if Blockstream server went away, would I still be able to spend my funds? Or if Blockstream was ordered to stop me from transacting? So the reason that's not a problem is because it's not just a 2 of 2 multisig. It's actually a 2 of 2 multisig or a time lock. And after 90 days, you can spend with a single key, your own key. So that means that you get the security benefit of the multisig, but it's classified. So Coin Center did some review of different types of wallets, and they said that green is a non-custodial because the back-end server, many wallets have a back-end server for indexing or other purposes, but in this case the back-end server couldn't freeze your funds if it wanted to, not that it wants to in fact, but it couldn't if it wanted to, which is the point, the don't trust verify point, because you can spend it yourself actually. So it's kind of quite interesting that you get security benefits of a central server with two-factor authentication, but you can bypass that after a bit of time. Yeah,
it's a very interesting use of multisig, and there's been, obviously in this industry there's been a lot of hype about smart contracts. This is a kind of contract, right?
Yep.
It's a very simple contract, and it's very effective, right? It gives you actual multi-sig two-factor authentication, but it lets you get the time lock exit there.
Right, and there's a second option as well. So this is the default is this 2 of 2 plus timeout. There's another configuration option which you have to install the desktop actually to configure, because the desktop has a few more features. But after you've set it up, you can import it, and it's sort of supported by the mobile app on iOS and Android as well. And the 2 of 3 configuration has the two-factor authentication, but there's no time lock. And the reason that works is the user has 2 keys, one for offline recovery and the other one in the device. So normally you use your in-device key and a two-factor authentication key. If you lose your two-factor authentication device, you can use a recovery tool with the phone key and the offline backup key and immediately take your funds. So there's no time delay in that model. So I think that's, for people who are worried, if it goes wrong, I have to wait 90 days. Well, use the 2 of 3 configuration, and you can take it anytime, immediately.
2 of 3, you have 2 of 3 multisig in there.
Yeah, that's a different option.
Right.
So there's 2 configuration options.
Got it.
And actually, we're also adding single sig because people like to try things out by importing an existing key to experience it first and upgrade later. So we're working on adding that at the moment as well. Yeah,
and you have a lot of different 2FA options too. You can do email and such. So it's a great wallet. It really is the first one that I recommend in general.
I mean, the other thing about the wallet is it has hardware wallet support. So you can plug with a small cable a hardware wallet directly into an Android phone. And now we have support on iOS for the Ledger Nano X, which is Bluetooth connected. So you can, and if you use that model, the keys are not on the phone; they're on a hardware wallet. So it's a very nice kind of portable solution. And you can use some people use the two-factor as a kind of a simple multi-party. So they would give, if they're running a small company, they'd give the two-factor authentication device to somebody else in the company, and that way they can't spend individually. They need the other person to review the transaction and check, it's not a hack or something, and only provide it if they can contact the other person, things like that. And you really, if you don't have the two-factor and you try and spend now, you can't spend.
Right. Does the desktop wallet also support hardware wallets?
Yeah, it's the same feature set. Actually, we just recently, like last week, released a beta version of Green Desktop. So we had, originally there was the Green Address wallet, which we improved the user interface and rebranded to Green for the mobile, but the desktop was still on the Green Address model, so it was Bitcoin only. The mobile wallets were Bitcoin and Liquid Layer 2 Bitcoin. Yeah. And so now we've completed the beta version of the SIM, like the full functionality on the desktop, so now you can do Liquid on the desktop too. So the first beta doesn't have hardware wallet support, but it's like second beta will. So
that's great.
We haven't advertised this too widely because we wanted to get some power users to test it out first.
Okay, well you probably get some here, so that's good.
Yeah, if you want to, there's a Telegram support group if you want to try it out.
Okay.
So,
Right on. Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. Yeah, Liquid's very interesting, and we're gonna touch on that a little bit. But let's take a step back and talk about privacy. One of the things that I heard you say in a speech, it must have been 2-3 years ago, you said that the next big conflict was probably going to be around privacy, right? And around privacy and fungibility within Bitcoin. I think we're starting to see kind of like the initial sparks of that conflict. We're seeing certain tensions between KYC compliance and things like CoinJoin, right? So there's a big tweet that came out, like I think it was Binance shut somebody's account because they thought that they had sent or were going to send or had previously sent to CoinJoin, I think, and they just assumed they were going to do it more, right? So there's a clear tension then, there, right? There's some sort of fiduciary duty from or some sort of legal obligation from Binance compliance to, be compliant in some way, some KYC. And then from the other side, we need to protect the privacy of Bitcoin in order to have fungibility. Fungibility means that you have a similar price. Every Bitcoin in the market has a similar price. There isn't a big markup between different Bitcoins because that can break its value as money. Where do you see us in that sort of in that conflict? Like, how are you starting to see kind of like the major players that might, that we might see play a big role in this, or is it still early?
Well, I mean, I think, it's definitely a limitation of Bitcoin that the cryptographic fungibility and privacy is not as good as the previous electronic cash systems. Now, of course, the previous electronic cash systems they were centralized, so they had different problems, but they had extremely strong privacy and fungibility. Fungibility in the sense that, somebody couldn't react to the history of Bitcoin because they wouldn't be able to see it. Like, all the coins look indistinguishable to look at, and you can't tell its previous use at all.
Yeah, if you could know the history of any dollar, you probably would be horrified.
Yeah,
it's good that you can't, in a sense, even though you can scan them and such. But.
Right. So I think it seems to me that some of the exchanges have gone too far. Like, they are exceeding the kind of preemptive account closure track record of even banks and PayPal. So that says to me that they've exceeded the regulatory pressures, and they're trying to over signal to the banks or the regulators that they're being very cautious or something. So I think what you can do as a user, if you experience this, is switch to a service that doesn't do that as much, because the exchanges do have trouble with banking service sometimes, and so they might be a little prone to doing that. But there are lots of exchanges, so if you switch to one that doesn't have this problem, and obviously you want to check the reputation of the exchange in terms of, because it's often it's trusting them for custody, so that's another factor, right? But there's a balance, and it seems to me that there's enough competition in exchanges that, if users tended to switch to ones that were less prone to shutting accounts down for spurious reasons, then they would back off, basically. So I think there's possibly a business solution. They're doing a couple of things. One is they're looking at the history for mixers and gambling sites, maybe online marijuana purchases, and coin joins. And the other thing they're doing is flagging for the exchange that the coins were reported stolen from another exchange. So I say that second thing is maybe useful because it discourages theft a bit, but the first thing is pretty bad because you don't have that experience drawing cash from an ATM. Nobody asks you, where was the note used before, and even PayPal doesn't get that much into the business of what did the previous user get the money from,
right?
Where did you use it afterwards? They don't make that their business.
Yeah, there's a really interesting must have been 1800s case where I think some lord got a bar of gold stolen, and the bar of gold had a specific sort of stamp on it, right? And that bar of gold ended up in another market, another city. Well, he sued I think he sued a bank that had it. Somehow he found out the bank had it, sued the bank, and that ended up sort of going to court. And they ruled that the bank is not it doesn't owe the gold to the lord because that would break the fundamental use of.
So I guess they could agree that it was stolen property, but they made a special rule for monetary instruments that, on a practical basis, you can't return the stolen property because the economy would collapse. People couldn't rely on money anymore, and that's just too bad. So
it's too bad. Yeah.
Right. So in terms of what can be improved, I think there's a lot of incremental improvements going to Bitcoin, but the technical solutions to provide strong privacy are still an area of research. So some sort of experimental protocols and coins have stronger privacy, but they're taking technical risk. They're using less conservative crypto or experimental crypto, which might have risk of failure, outright failure, or theft of coins, or inflation and stuff like that. So the set of things. So Bitcoin won't tend to adopt high risk tech because they want to focus on security and dependability. But there are things that do fit that profile. The Schnorr and Taproot helps a bit. It's more about fingerprinting, that you can't as easily tell different wallets apart. So we talked about Green. You can recognize its transactions because they're 2 of 2 with a time lock. Now with Schnorr and Taproot, we will adapt to use that once it's available. So then a Green transaction would look the same as a single sig transaction, for example.
And Schnorr and Taproot are two sort of very important technologies that are, they're the big next soft fork that's coming up, right?
Yeah.
Can you just break that down a little bit so people kind of know what those words mean?
Yeah, so the Schnorr signatures are a kind of signature algorithm upgrade from the current signature scheme used in Bitcoin, which is ECDSA. It's a very similar kind of signature algorithm. Schnorr actually predates ECDSA. And I think the only reason that the Internet Protocols community started adopting ECDSA is because Schnorr was patented, and people don't like to use patented algorithms. But the patents expired shortly before Bitcoin was released, actually. So now it makes sense actually to switch to Schnorr because it has its simplicity adds advantages. So you can make a multi-signature that involves multiple people signing and still come out with a single signature. So it's more compact. And it also, you can get the anti-fingerprinting because at the blockchain level, if you can't distinguish between a 2 of 2 multisig or even a 2 of 3 multisig and a single sig, that's good because now you don't know which type of wallet it is, and knowing which type of wallet is maybe a hint that the taint tracing analysis can use to sort of correlate things. A small one, so it's not it's not a game-changing privacy advantage, but it's some advantage.
It's definitely a move forward, yeah.
Right, and the Taproot is something distinct from Schnorr, which probably could be used separately, but it's been combined with it. And the idea is that a lot of Bitcoin scripts have an if branch, so there'll be a normal use, and then if something goes wrong, the if branch will be used, or the or branch. And what Taproot does is it allows you to hide the or branch that's only used for recovery purposes. so it's not visible on the transaction. So say 99% of the time you just spend it normally, or 1% of the time something goes wrong, then you only reveal to the blockchain the recovery process if it goes wrong. So that gives lots of advantages. You've got anti-fingerprinting unless you need to use it, then you get fingerprinted. And also it's smaller because you don't reveal the whole script, right? You only reveal it if you need it, so it saves space.
So it's a privacy improvement and it saves space.
Yeah.
Basically. Right. One of the ideas that's kind of floating around this topic is that maybe, let's assume that privacy is good, and let's assume that there's going to be an attack on the privacy in Bitcoin. The way that you might deal with it is, and the way that some people are thinking about it is, well, let's make sure everybody uses something like CoinJoin with like Wasabi Wallet, so that all the coins are dirty, and it becomes, we win by simply dominating the market, right? We just sort of make all the coins dirty, so it's just like, well, it's too late, they're all dirty, we can't have clean coins. And so, well, I want to know what you think about that strategy, but I also just heard Jimmy Song say that Taproot and Schnorr are going to maybe make it cheaper to use more private ways of using Bitcoin.
Yeah, it does give a small economic incentive, like your transactions are smaller, so you pay less fees if they're joined. Because one of the properties of the Schnorr signature is that you can aggregate signatures. So you've got a transaction in Bitcoin can have multiple coins going into it. So you can combine all of the public keys that are going to sign into one and make a single signature. So it makes signing transactions much smaller. So that feature to do aggregation is actually not in the current release plan, like the BIPs, but it's a second feature that will come later. So I think they just broke it up to make it more incrementally deployed. So that will give an incentive when that second part is deployed slightly. I think another thing you can do for privacy is more ambiguous. So we, Blockstream and some other people interested in privacy tech had a workshop, hackathon kind of thing in London last year, and spent 3 days brainstorming with whiteboards about, what could we do to support peer-to-peer client-side joining. Because if you do joining on a server, there's something identifiable, but if it's in the wallet and it's peer-to-peer, that's a much more robust approach. So it's technically challenging, but so it's kind of a lot of brainstorming and no solutions. That's hard. Brainstorming no solutions, or finding partial solutions and then realizing they weren't as good as we thought. But it's one thing that we did come out of it, which is a thing called pay to endpoint, also known as PayJoin. So the idea is basically your wallet, when you make a payment to another user or to a merchant, it ends up joining your payment with the merchant's coins in their own wallet. And then, so the point is there are two things being combined. One is you paying, and the other one is the merchant or the recipient defragging their wallet, like consolidating coins. So, the merchant will actually put a coin into your payment to himself, and then because you don't know how much is being paid, even though the amounts are different, it creates ambiguity. So because it's it's not the same amount of money going in is not coming out because there's a payment mixed into it. So I think it would be interesting to see that implemented in a few wallets, so that you could pay join. So when I pay you, the recipient is taking the opportunity to defrag his wallet a bit, which he wants to do anyway, otherwise you get dust build up and stuff like that.
Right. It's really one of the interesting things about Bitcoin, that you can just engineer some of these problems and just keep looking for ways to solve them, right?
So I mean it's an incremental solution. Another kind of more ambitious, longer term thing is confidential transactions, which was something I proposed in 2013. It had a different name at that point. It was homomorphic encrypted values or something, which is describing the cryptography more than the feature. But confidential transactions is interesting, also not a silver bullet, but it's an interesting new privacy feature, was just that it encrypts the values of the transaction, so you can't see how much Bitcoin is being spent or how much is going to change versus the payment. So technically you can't as such distinguish from change from the payment, but you can maybe infer something because of the amounts. You wouldn't use. If you have some idea about the wallet, maybe you can infer what's changed or not from which coin was chosen, right? If you chose a big coin and you had a smaller coin, maybe that payment is the larger amount is not changed because otherwise you would use a smaller coin. You see what I mean? So
you can data mine them, sort of.
Yeah, you can infer things from it, and then the other problem is that people will combine the change. So,
right.
The effect you get with confidential transactions, and you can try it out on the Liquid Bitcoin Layer 2 in the green wallet. If you convert some funds into Liquid, you can peer-to-peer spend, and there's some exchanges with deposit in Liquid. It's not as good for cold storage because it's a federated block signer system. I think Bitcoin, the main chain, is always more sensor resistant and better for more secure for cold storage. But nevertheless, if you want to try it out and experience confidential transactions and look at what it would look like to get a preview if that was to come into Bitcoin, of how it would be experienced, what you get is if you go look on a block explorer, there's a Liquid block explorer. You can see the payment, so you can see the input transactions and the output transactions, but all of the amounts just say confidential. And that's because somebody running a full node, they can tell that it adds up, but they don't know what the amounts are. So the type of cryptography is you can still add it up and show that the inputs add up to the outputs. It's just that nobody other than the parties in the transaction can see what the values are.
Right. And that's similar to Zcash's use of zero-knowledge proofs, or Monero's sort of use of...
Yeah, I mean, it is a zero-knowledge proof. It's a kind of hand-optimized one to this use case. So Greg Maxwell and others found some more optimizations from the original proposal and implemented it into Elements and ultimately Liquid, so you can use it live.
In some of the zero-knowledge proof implementations, like with altcoins, there's concerns about the certainty that you have over the issuance of the coins.
Right.
How does that work in this system?
So generally, there are two variants of the.
Whoa, hang on a sec. It's like there's a. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So generally, there are two variants of the range proof that is used in it. So one, and the risk is the quantum supercomputer very many decades in the future that could break discrete log, like could compute discrete logs quickly. And there are two possible failure modes depending on which approach you take. So if you take the approach we used in Liquid, then somebody could break quantum, have a quantum supercomputer and compute discrete logs. They could forge, for a given coin, they could forge it to find a different randomization or blinding factor with an increased value, and you wouldn't be able to tell from the outside. So that's the inflation risk version. But the benefit of that version is there will be no privacy leak because essentially any possible value is achievable. So, in the far future, somebody looking back at the records can't tell, even if they have a God mode ability to peer through the crypto, they still can't tell what you used because any value is possible, right? So that's one failure. Some people argue that's interesting. The other approach is you do a different kind of commitment. So the first type is called a Pedersen commitment. There's another type called an El-Gamal commitment. And with the El-Gamal commitment, the God mode, future supercomputer, it can break the privacy, but it can't create inflation. So you got to take your pick.
Right.
And there's somebody at Blockstream who wrote a paper. This is Tim Ruffing about switch commitments, and his idea was that you start with the privacy version, but you make a commitment, so you hash also an undisclosed second version, and then you switch later. So that gives you privacy, and you can switch the protocol if it starts to become weak in the future. But you still have the guarantee that if it were to suddenly get broken, you could prevent spending with the simple method and require spending using the. So you can choose to give up privacy and prevent inflation if needed later, basically. So that's the switch commitment approach. So in Liquid, it's not so much about long-term storage. So we went for the privacy model because people will be putting funds in, doing some trading, and then taking it out for cold storage. So we're not as worried about very long-term storage.
Right. And with Liquid, it's interesting because it's a side chain, right? So you're collateralizing Bitcoin, and then those collateralized Bitcoins, you're using them in different ways. But if there was an inflation bug, for example, right, that would not be transmitted to the main chain because it's collateralized, right?
Yeah, so it's a kind of security boundary.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting modularity option for Bitcoin that people can try different technology. You could make a layer 2 like this that does something more experimental, with high attack risk.
Sure.
But it allows people to innovate faster. And we had some. I think you get value from trying things in practice. You learn things about how users use it, what people think about it, and it drives further research when people think about new ways to improve it. So there's some room for further optimization. So bulletproofs is another way to make more compact range proofs. Part of the trade-off is they're bigger. The transactions are about 10 times bigger. That's the side effect.
Right.
Now, arguably, you can replace many transactions with a single transaction. Sometimes people break up their coins into chunks for storage. So that's a trade-off.
Cool.
10 minutes.
Yeah. We should get going. But one more question. Recently, this CEO, I think, of Dropit got arrested, and there are some allegations that he was running a mixer, right? So when it comes to sort of these privacy tools, you sometimes, like at least with WhatsApp, for example, there's some sort of server in the middle, and I believe they have some ways to mitigate that server being attacked, right? And that server doesn't know anything, but they are sort of facilitating the engagement. What do you see as sort of ways to improve that side of things, or what do you think about that?
Well, I think really the privacy tech should be peer-to-peer and in the wallets, because that benefits from the decentralization. Even before Bitcoin, you had BitTorrent, other peer-to-peer technologies, and so the content distribution industry lobbied against file sharing, but ultimately they couldn't really stop it because it's peer-to-peer. So the thing that was centralized was Napster, and that did ultimately go out of business, right? Because centralized systems are single points of failure. They're a point for somebody to, legality is not the only question. It's also resources to defend. If the attacker is a well-funded lobby group, maybe run out of money or something. So that's the risk. So I think the lesson from previous kind of user interest to have something versus competing industries' interest to not have that happen, that decentralized systems win. So it's better if it's peer-to-peer and in the wallets, I think.
It's better if it's peer-to-peer.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.